Looking to catch up on the latest Star Wars books? Featuring sound effects and music directly from the movies, Star Wars audiobooks are the definitive listening experience. Listen to Star Wars Light of the Jedi, written by Charles Soule, read by Mark Thompson, and Star Wars The High Republic, A Test of Courage, written by Justina Ireland and read by Kaylor Lee. Available now wherever audiobooks are sold.
This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Ashley Eckstein, Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi, show number 390. We are your spoiler-free place for Star Wars discussion, analysis, and rhetoric. I'm your host, Dan Z, drinking One Nation coffee out of my Boba's Beans coffee mug, thrilled to talk Star Wars with each and every one of you. On today's episode, Tom Gross returns as we discuss our top 5 spoiler-free things we love about Justina Ireland's novel, A Test of Courage. This is, in essence, the second novel about the High Republic. The more you read this book, the more you read stuff about the High Republic, the more you're going to love this new era of Star Wars storytelling. We are very excited, and we're going to do our very best to keep it spoiler-free for you. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some coffee with Kenobi.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first?
Joining me today for a cup of coffee to talk about A Test of Courage, the second book in the High Republic, this brand new section of the mythology of Star Wars. I'm running out of superlatives for it, and I don't have to come up with any because I've got my co-pilot with me, Mr. Tom Gross.
Well, hello. It's so good to be on the show again. It's been a while.
I guess it kind of has. I mean, it seems like it hasn't because, of course, we do pour over every week with our good buddy Corey Clubb. But yeah, having you back on Coffee with Kenobi is wonderful. We are very excited because you had been reading A Test of Courage. I think you kind of got rolling on it a little bit before I did. Yes. And then once I finished up Light of the Jedi, I just thought, you know what, I'm ready. I'm psyched now. Let's jump in. Because full disclosure, I guess overall, before you ever read Light of the Jedi, how did you feel about this new era in Star Wars storytelling?
Oh, I was super excited. First of all, the secrecy of Project Luminous for, about a year and a half. And then we got the concept of the High Republic that came along with some character names and concept art. And then we got the scroll, the film scroll, or however you want, the descriptive scroll of the era. And and it just kept building and building, and I became more and more intrigued. So I was really excited on the release of the Light of Jedi. And then of course, once you read that Keystone book by Charles Soule, it's kind of like, I'm ready for more. And in fact, usually after I read one Star Wars book, I tend to turn my attention to like a different type of genre or something for work. I didn't do that. I went straight from the Light of Jedi to Test of Courage because I wanted to just soak up as much as I could.
So I was intrigued, but I wouldn't raise it anything above that. And I've talked about this on previous shows, but I felt a little bit of a malaise from I don't know that I needed a break from Star Wars, but I just really wasn't sure where I wanted to go. I was still very much on a Mandalorian high from that wonderful series and how amazing season 2 was. And then we've got this whole new cast of characters. And as excited as I was, I felt a little overwhelmed. Quite honestly, it was a bit daunting. And then I tapped into my academic side. And I got out my Kylo Ren, The Force Awakens notebook that I still have, and I just started writing it. And I opened up after I finished Light of the Jedi, which was tremendous, which of course we flew through. I turned to A Test of Courage, and I started taking notes. Every time there was a new character, I would write them down. I would keep plenty of space between entries so I could add to them as the book progressed. I wrote down page numbers of significant era items that happened to the story, as well as key moments I thought enhanced the lore of Star Wars. And that just sort of opened up new doors for me.
Oh.
So I went back and I didn't reread Light of the Jedi again, but I went through and I flipped through it, and I found all the character introductions, all the key moments, and I made notes of them too. And I think because I'm just that guy, I'm going to make digital notes of this to keep track of it for myself. And it has really helped me to understand how incredible this thing is and how it is working together. So what we're going to do tonight is we have elected, just like we did last week, we're going to give top 5 things we love about this new story, Test of Courage. We're going to make it spoiler free. Now, I feel like we were pretty good last week, not spoiling anything with Light of the Jedi. It's going to be a little bit more tricky to do that with this because it's a shorter book. It's been out. I mean, it hasn't been out all that long. What, about a month? A little over a month?
Yeah, about right.
Yeah. So we're not going to give away key moments. I mean, certainly if you want to be completely fresh, I would suggest that after you've downloaded this, that you just sort of put it aside and come back to it after you've read Test of Courage. So again, we're not going to reveal any key points or story plot threads or character development, but we are going to, casually reference certain things in as creative a way as possible. Is that fair to say?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll just state up front that if I do, it's out of pure excitement and it's not intended to ruin anything for anyone. Plus, Dan, you do have the power of chop.
It's true.
So if you catch any like funny skips, that was me just totally pumped and excited and dropping something that I probably should save for later. But yes,
and not
I definitely
because Wanda Maximoff cut it out of the final broadcast.
Right, do over.
Yeah, we're gonna dive in. And we're gonna give our top 5 spoiler-free things we love about a Test of Courage. So mine aren't in any particular order. They're just 5 things, and I'm sure that's going to spring into all kinds of questions. Are yours in any particular order?
No, I just wrote them down in the order in which I thought of them. So if I were to order them, probably the second one I'll discuss is probably my top one. But no, there's no real particular order.
Okay, well then why don't you go ahead and share your first one with us, good sir?
Oh, awesome. So I wanted to start by, this isn't really my first item, but I just want to start by how excited I was to read this book because it's Justina Ireland. As a young adult librarian, I'm familiar with her work through particularly, she has a 2-part series currently called Dread Nation that is it's really, really well written. She's got really good descriptors in it. And so I was excited to see how that translates into a book like this. Now, this book technically is not necessarily young adult. It's a little, I would say, would you agree that it skews more probably lower middle grades to upper elementary, like 5th, 6th, 7th grade and up?
Yeah, I would say
yeah.
7th and up, yes.
So with that said, I want to just encourage everybody, most of us listening to this are adults. This is totally appropriate for adults. Sometimes I look at books like this and I'm like, it's just going to be a kid's story. You guys, this is really a must read, and it's kind of refreshing to read because it's pretty simplistic. And I think I'll talk about the book a little bit more as we go through. So let me jump into my number 1. And so my number 1 item that I wanted to talk about was a character that I when I started reading the book, I was kind of like, oh boy, here we go. But it did not take me long to warm up to this character. And that is the character named Avon. And Avon is sort of a mischievous girl, but not mischievous out of like ill doing. She's mischievous in the way of curiosity of science, curiosity of technology, and she's just always tinkering with things. So I don't think any of it's done to be specifically mischievous. It's done to, I wonder what would happen if I did this. And so you get past sort of like or at least I did. I got past the like, oh boy, here we go, a kid that's going to cause trouble, and I see where this is going. I got past it really fast because once you realize that she is doing it out of just pure curiosity and the love of the things that she discovers, it really becomes cool. And so the part 2 of my first one is to talk about her droid, which is named J9, because she does modifications to this droid. and is like playing with this droid. It's a protocol droid, and I think they take it as a protocol droid, but the parents modify it to be like a nursemaid droid, to be a caretaker rather than necessarily protocol. And so Avon sees this droid and is like, I wonder if I could do this to the droid. And I wonder if I could do this to the droid, and does all these sort of things behind the scenes. And you start to see some change in the droid as it plays through the book that is really cool. And it actually kind of makes me think of some other droids in the Star Wars saga that I'm like, oh yeah, I see how maybe some of these things developed over time. Now, not necessarily directing it back to the character Avon, just in theory, this modification of droids. So I was really impressed with that character overall. The development of the character throughout the story. She does grow and learns things, but never loses her curiosity. But decides that there is some weight to the curiosity, and maybe in the future she'll be a little bit more careful, or at least calculating of, if I do this, what could happen and how would that impact things going forward? So Avon and her droid J9 are probably my first things that I want to talk about with this book.
I love that. That's really, really cool. You said a lot of interesting things there. And I realized I didn't really give let me try to, I'll give the Amazon write-up. This is what is given to them to describe the book. It says, Vernestra Rowe is a new Jedi Knight at age 16, but her first real assignment feels an awful lot like babysitting. She's been charged with supervising 12-year-old aspiring inventor Avon Staros, who you just talked about, on a cruiser headed to the dedication of a wondrous new space station called Starlight Beacon. But soon into their journey, bombs go off aboard the cruiser. While the adult Jedi try to save the ship, Vernestra, Avon's droid J6, a Jedi Padawan, and an ambassador's son make it to an escape shuttle, but communications are out and supplies are low. They decide to land on a nearby moon, which offers shelter but not much more, and unbeknownst to them, danger lurks in the forest. So the reason I bring that up is I meant to ask you at the beginning, overall, what do you think of the book? So I know you gave us your first one, which is great, but tell me overall what you thought.
I love this book. I thought it was so charming. It really, to me, is kind of like, and I've said this numerous times about a lot of these sort of side stories in Star Wars. It takes Charles Soule's book and just sort of colors in some pictures to me. I love the introduction of the two new, the Jedi and the Padawan, which are not necessarily Master and Padawan. It's just a Jedi Knight and a Padawan that come together off of the ship that has the explosion. And I really thought it was a very, where I would consider Charles Soule's book very complex and really building the era. This one is a simplistic book. It's limited in characters. It has a very linear storyline, but introduces dynamic characters. It brings in some important, to me, at least seemingly important stories and lore to the High Republic story, which is why I think anybody and everybody should read this. And it's not just for upper elementary, lower middle school. And I think it drives a larger story forward. So I really loved this book. I thought it was wonderful.
I absolutely love this book. I did not want it to end. I read it in 2 days. And while it's a young adult novel, but I want to be really clear on this, and Tom already was as well. That doesn't mean that it's dumbed down. Doesn't mean it's a kid's book.
No.
Yes, kids can enjoy it, but it's got some very heavy adult themes that I think that open up some very, very important conversations about the choices we make and good versus evil and how we treat our fellow man and, the importance of trust and the importance of earning trust. I just think there are a lot of great things there. Often young adult novels are better than novels written for an older audience. And I think this one, much like Light of the Jedi, is just tremendous the way it builds upon the lore, these characters, which are great. And that brings me to my number one. My number one is the characters, the new characters added to this. There are a ton of characters in Light of the Jedi, and there are various degrees of, how much they're involved in the story. in this we pretty much have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 main characters. And we spend a lot of time with them. I really feel like we get to know them. There isn't a dull one in the bunch, really. And the fact that I'm invested so much that when the book was over, I wanted to see when the next book was going to come out involving these heroes specifically, because I cannot wait to see what's going to happen. It sounds like it's going to be this summer, which is just really, really fun. I can't tell you how much fun I had with this thing. I mean, Light of the Jedi is awesome, but and it's intriguing and fascinating, but I don't know if I would say it's fun. And that's not a knock, but just very, very heavy. There's a lot of loss of life. There's a lot of things that happen that are really, really awful. But there's also some interesting cute moments as well. This thing, while there are some very dark moments and some really rough things that happen that these characters have to face, is just incredibly fun.
Agreed. And when you said, so the word awesome is something that we overuse just in our language. But when you described Light of the Jedi as awesome, I think that's perfect description for this. Mm-hmm. And the word I would use to describe this book, Test of Courage, is wonderful.
Nice.
Because awesomeness has weight, whereas wonderful just brings kind of joy to me. And that's what this book did. And so I guess I'll go to my number 2, which kind of builds on yours and continues with the theme of my first one. And that is, I want to talk about Vernestra, because I absolutely fell in love with her as a character, as a new Jedi Knight. And that's probably what I enjoyed most about her. Is what was refreshing was she is a newly knighted Jedi, and this is one of her first missions. Is that, did I get that right? At least that's how I took it.
That's right. And she's the only one in the High Republic. She's the earliest to get the rank of Jedi Knight. She passed the trials early at the age of 15.
That's right. So she's young, but what I loved about it was, when you think of a Jedi Master, or even some of the Jedi Knights that are older, they walk around with both on the public perception as well as you see it in their just their poise. They walk around with they walk into a room and everyone knows a Jedi Knight has entered. Whereas I don't know that you would know that with Vernestra, because she still has some water behind the ears, or whatever that expression is, but she has the knowledge, she has the power. And so when things get dangerous in this book, I have full confidence. And so does she. She just plays and uses her powers with confidence, but not with, I guess, ego. And I think it's very refreshing. And I love the way in which she approaches things with a sort of newness as a Jedi Knight, the way she talks to Avon with such optimism, the way she talks to one of the Padawan, which I'll definitely talk about a little bit. And then now I forget the ambassador's son's name.
The ambassador's son's name is Honesty Weft.
Honesty, that's right. And the way Vernestra handles herself with him, I just have fallen in love with this character, and seeing the picture on the front of the cover, oh my gosh, to me, when I first met Rey, it was kind of a similar feel. Like when I see Vernestra, I have that she's so much fun to read. Every time she shows up in the book, I was happy that she was there, because I knew something good or positive would come from it. And she has, and I don't know, we might talk about this later, but this is all I'll personally say about it. She definitely has a unique lightsaber. We've got characters in the Star Wars lore, like Ezra Bridger, for example, who has this unique take on creating, Ezra creates this lightsaber that has, the pistol in it, which I can only imagine how Yoda would feel about that. But she definitely has a very unique lightsaber that fits her personality quite a bit.
Interesting. I don't see it as a metaphor, but I'm certainly interested in your analysis of that. And to be honest, Justina talked early on, before the book was released, about it. So I think you can say what it is.
Oh, can I?
Yeah. Again,
okay.
If you want to be completely spoiler free and know absolutely nothing, please pause the show. But I guess this is a mild spoiler, but again, it has been out there in the public eye.
Okay, well then I will go ahead and talk a little bit about that. So Vernestra reveals, and I'm going to the page here. She reveals that her lightsaber has a characteristic that
Page 121.
Yeah, 121, where it says, the quote is light whips, and so basically her lightsaber can turn into a whip. And it says here on page 121 that light whips were used by the Night Sisters. And when I read that line, oh my gosh, the goosebumps rose off of my skin.
I know.
And I was like, what? And it says she learned very early on that the whip required more attention and care than the lightsaber. And so, of course, my mind went to what kind of terrible things could happen to someone who doesn't really know how to use this. And I think about Indiana Jones whipping himself as a child right in the face, and that's where that scar came from. Am I right on that?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, that sounds horrifying. But then it also goes into deeper lore and talks about where else the Jedi, and I thought the High Republic was going to be our ancient lore. This book implies that there is an even more ancient lore where Jedi used the light whips to combat an even more evil in the past. And so this has been sort of passed down. And so I guess where I say that I really like the idea of her having a light whip is it's sort of, I don't know, it sort of to me goes along with her newness. And so we have this new Jedi Knight, and she's going to reveal, because the light whips do not seem to be very common to the Jedi of this High Republic era. And so when she reveals it, she feels like she's giving up something new about herself. And so I kind of saw the light whip as being sort of significant to her because of her own newness. But maybe there's more to it, or maybe I'm making too much of it. But I just love that idea that she pulls this out, and she's like, okay, I really didn't want to reveal this quite yet, but
right,
it's needed now.
Well, it's based on some character stuff with one of the characters as far as why she won't do it. Yeah, it says that the Jedi, some Jedi use it during the Sith Wars, which again, I don't remember that term ever being used like that in canonical Star Wars, the Sith Wars.
Right.
So
yeah, and I didn't want to quite go there. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's remarkably cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of cool, my second one is the character of Imri Kantaros. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He is a Padawan to Jedi Master Douglas, who's also in this book. He's human, and he has this wonderful internal conflict. There's something that happens that is very, very difficult that he has to wrestle with and keep in mind, his burgeoning Jedi teachings as a Padawan. And I was really drawn to him. And one of his key aspects of his abilities with the Force, because when you're a Jedi, there are certain things that everyone is very familiar with and everyone has the ability to do. But some Jedi have particular abilities that are much stronger than other people's. And his leans more towards an emotional range. I won't give too much more than that. That might even be too much. But he has an internal conflict that I found really fascinating. And I think in many ways it might be the linchpin of this book because of a number of reasons. So I won't go into too much more detail. I will say I look forward to revisiting this again when we can actually talk more in specifics, but I want people to get a chance to read this book because it really is great. But that is definitely my second one, Imri and his internal conflict.
Yeah. And so I'll build off of that a little bit because I wanted to talk a little bit about Imri as well. So my first three are very character driven. As I said in the early on in the opening, I really love the simplicity of the book and the way we get to and the way that Justina Ireland develops these characters. And so I guess I'll just touch upon where I was headed because you danced around what I really liked about Imri, and that was this idea of the Force, and so the book reveals some different ways that the Force is kind of viewed in this High Republic era. And again, I don't want to say too much about it because it's wonderful to discover as you read the book. But I guess the thing I would say is just the fresh look at it and the way that the Jedi of this era see the Force. And we talk about this also in the Light of the Jedi. There's definitely a unique way that the Force is used, both very physically in these books, as well as the way they've internalized the Force and they see it. It's definitely different than the Republic era, and different than the way that the Resistance era kind of looks at the Force. So it's really interesting to me, and I love the way that it was portrayed, especially through the character Imri in this book.
Is that your number 3?
That is my number 3.
Good. Okay, well, that's interesting because my number 3 is very similar to that. It involves a very important aspect of the Force and what balance in the Force means. I've talked about this a lot over the years. We talked about this at the Indiana Disney meetup.
Yes.
And I wrote about it in the Star Wars book. And now, and I'm not going to say what it is, but I will say, when you get a copy of A Test of Courage, look on pages 129 and on page 196. Look at those 2 pages, because I told you I took some copious notes. It really addresses balance in the Force and what that means in this era of the High Republic. How that translates into modern Star Wars, I'm not sure. And it's very hard to talk about. But again, read it, 129 and 196. There's some fascinating stuff there that really caught my eye, and I wrote all kinds of thoughts in this handy dandy little notebook here that I will share someday with everybody. So that's my number 2.
Oh, I love it. Yes. Gosh. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll move on. And
yeah,
really,
I'll tell you what, before we move on, let's take a really quick break and we will return with more conversation, spoiler-free, hopefully, conversation about A Test of Courage. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
This is Vanessa Marshall, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Looking to catch up on the latest Star Wars books but can't find the time? Try listening to them on audio, featuring sound effects, top-notch narrators, and music directly from the movies. Star Wars audiobooks are the definitive listening experience. Centuries before the Skywalker saga, a new adventure begins. The High Republic is a massive, interconnected, cross-publisher initiative focused on an all-new era of Star Wars storytelling. Listen to Star Wars Light of the Jedi, written by Charles Soule and read by Mark Thompson, and A Test of Courage, written by Justina Ireland and read by Kaylor Lee. Visit penguinrandomhouseaudio.com/coffee with Kenobi to listen to clips and find your next listen, or buy now wherever books and audiobooks are sold. And speaking of Penguin Random House Audio and A Test of Courage, I'm going to play a clip for you right now from the audiobook A Test of Courage. Although I will say it does have what I consider to be a mild spoiler, so if you don't want to hear it, I would fast forward about a minute or so. Okay, here we go on to the clip.
When Vernestra woke, it was with a start. She didn't remember falling asleep, but her body hummed in the way it always did after using the Force heavily. She wasn't exhausted, but there was still a hollowness in her body that was partly hunger and partly the after effects of using the Force. Even though she meditated regularly, it was rare that she was required to wield so much power at once. Fighting against the natural vacuum of space had not been easy. When she was a youngling, she'd often reached for the Force, once she learned how, just to feel that thrill, that calm sensation of the galaxy and all the life and energy moving through it. When she became a Padawan, she found herself reaching for the Force every night before bed during her meditation, like putting on an extra comfortable tunic after a long day of hard work. She would often drift off after such meditation, lulled by a sense of rightness and peace. This sleep had not been that kind of rest. Vernestra stretched as she woke, body aching, head pounding. She'd tested her limits, helping Douglas keep the ship together, pushing away the debris field as they fled the wreckage of the Steadywing. Douglas. A jab of sorrow lanced through Vernestra as she thought of the Jedi Master. He would return to the cosmic force that connected all things in the galaxy. Vernestra would feel that connection and the echo of Douglas every time she meditated before bed. The cosmic force was calm and helped give a Jedi wisdom and guidance. That was what happened to all living things when they died. But that didn't minimize the ache of loss Vernestra felt when thinking about the other Jedi. He'd been the first to welcome her to Port Hayleap and to congratulate her on passing her trials at such a young age. When I was your age, I was still trying to figure out the third cadence, Fern. You're an amazing Jedi, and I'm proud to get a chance to work with you before you end up on the council, he'd said with a belly laugh that had made Vernestra feel warm and welcomed. And now he was gone.
MEI and Mouse Fan Travel is your one-stop shop for your vacation needs and your plans to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, or the cruise lines. Travel looks much different now than it did a couple of months ago, and with the opening of Walt Disney World and soon, hopefully, the opening of Disneyland, you need a place to go where you can trust, and they will help you figure out and navigate all the different circumstances and guidelines that Disney has put out for you. And I can say that we had our vacation modified, and as soon as dates were announced, MEI contacted me directly to help me reschedule, which is exactly what I was hoping to do. So if you are interested in rescheduling your vacation or want to try to plan a Walt Disney World, Disneyland vacation, or anywhere else you want to go on the planet, be sure to contact MEI and Mouse Fan Travel at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. Their signature service and expert advice will help you maximize your vacation time and dollar, and they will help you figure out all the different changes and modifications going on at the Disney theme parks. They are amazing, and I can tell you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, the peace of mind that Becky Menken and the crew at MEI and Mouse Fan Travel have given me is invaluable. If you're interested at all, again, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. We are back talking about our top 5 things we love about A Test of Courage. We're trying to make it spoiler-free, although I feel like I'm kind of breaking... No, I don't know. I feel like when we talked about some of the movies, like when I went and saw The Last Jedi, or media screening of that, I did about 25 minutes spoiler-free, and I probably gave about as much information as I did here, so I think we're doing okay. Do you?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah, if anything, one thing I would say is if I hadn't read this book and I was hearing the things you're saying, I'm going to Amazon, or I'm heading over to the local bookstore of our town, and I'm picking this book up because seriously, it's 200 plus a little bit pages, but it reads very quickly, and I think everybody's going to love this book.
I agree. So I'm guessing that your number 4 is going to be, well, I want to go ahead and say what your number 4 is, and I'll tell you if I was thinking the same thing.
Well, my number 4 we've kind of addressed already, so maybe there's some other things, and I'm actually going to ask you, since you've got your copious notes, one thing I've loved about both books, but this one especially, because 121 was the page. When I hit that page, this book took off like, grease lightning. Because what I loved on this page, as I mentioned, was the lore. And the High Republic seems that it's got lots of lore to offer. When I thought the High Republic was going to be the lore, they're offering up even deeper cuts. So we've already mentioned the Night Sisters. We talked about the Sith Wars. There was also mention, and I'm not sure, Dan, where exactly it is. I thought it was in the same area. They do refer to ancient Sith something or other. Do you have notes on that?
Ancient Sith.
It was.
I do.
They used ancient and Sith in the same line, and I was like, what? Like, nowhere was the Sith mentioned in Charles Soule's book, and up to this point in this book, the Sith are not mentioned. And so when the Sith are brought up, it's like, sit up, this is going to get serious.
Was it in that same area with the light whip?
It should have been, yeah.
I guess I didn't write anything. It does talk about how I'm not going to say.
Okay.
It's not 129 though. It's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess it's
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I see it. Yes. Okay. So yes, and here the Night Sisters are mentioned again, and so
you'll want to read it if you're interested in Star Wars and more about this galaxy and how things have come to be. This is definitely a book you're going to enjoy.
Yeah, and so my number 4, I'll just say, is the lore that we are teased with and sort of given us. They're handing us a plate, but it's only got half the meal on it, and it's delicious.
It is delicious.
Top that.
Yes, I will do my best. All right, so my number 4 is the character of Vernestra Rowe. You mentioned her as your number 2. I didn't say anything at the time because I wanted to wait, but I think I love the fact that she's a newly anointed Jedi Knight, but she doesn't have any pretense about her. She is very, very capable, very, very confident for a 15-year-old, and I don't want to say too much. Her master was still in Geos, who people who are familiar with the High Republic will recognize. He is the Jedi master that has the lightsaber that has the cross guard on it, like King Arthur, but it's not. But it's an actual. It's the actual hilt, not the blade, like Kylo Ren.
Kylo Ren, right?
And I don't want to. It's hard to talk about her without giving away key ideas, but her inventiveness, her passion, her strength in the face of adversity, and the way she handles particular situations with grace and dignity, and in this amazing resolution and strength are wonderful. I cannot wait to spend more time with her in other books because she's tremendous. And going back at The Last Jedi and seeing her mentioned occasionally, or seeing her mentioned on Into the Dark, Claudia Gray's New York Times best-selling book, which was just announced today,
about that
is very, very cool. I think she might be my favorite Jedi in the High Republic.
I absolutely loved her. And I think what you said is spot on, is what I was trying to get at. The grace and dignity in which she faces everything. And if you go and read her introduction, and then you read her final scenes at the end of the book, she really does grow. And she grows with those 2 words you just mentioned, the grace and dignity. It's wonderful. Wonderful.
You got one left, buddy.
Oh, I saved the worst for last.
The worst.
The worst for last. I want to talk a little bit about Clynith Da and Gwishy.
Bless you. Yeah, yes, I know exactly who you. They're the first 2 characters in the story.
Yeah, they're the 2 characters we have not mentioned, and they come from the group, the Nile.
Yes.
And what I found to be really interesting is this is a book for, as we mentioned, late elementary, young middle school, but meant for everybody, as we've mentioned numerous times. But that's the audience. And so I wondered how they were going to handle the Nile, because we know from Charles Soule's book, they're just nasty, evil, despicable.
Yeah.
They're all of the above. And so I wondered how Justina Ireland was going to handle that, if even the Nile were going to show up in this book. I wondered if we could even introduce them to this audience. And she does just a magnificent job of portraying these 2 characters as, and I'm taking the idea that they are very young, probably Vernestra's age, in the Nile. Did you gather that as well? They're definitely. I didn't feel that they were adults. Did you?
No, they're young. They're younger.
They're children of the Nile.
Yes.
But they have a very serious mission to create some chaos in this time, and to really do some damage to the celebration of the Starlight Beacon. And they do their job very well, but not to the perfection that the Nile would expect. And so, I'm not going to say much more about what they do, but just to say the portrayal of these 2 characters gave everything that I needed to know that they are evil, they love power, they feel hate, but they also have fear of their own Nihil leaders. And that's all I needed to know, how dangerous these two were. And I wondered, when they were in the act of doing what they were going to do, if it was actually going to succeed because of the level of the book. But it does. And it definitely has consequence. And so Justina Ireland did a magnificent job of describing these characters and the evil in which they portray, but she does it in a very, I guess I'm going to go back to the words used for Dinestra, but she does it as an author with grace to make it not seem so horrible to a young audience.
Wow. Yeah, we're very well said. Very well said. I'm surprised that you included them, but I totally get why you did, and I think you explained it really well.
And I think, so I guess the reason I say that is for those of us like me and you who have children that may not quite be ready to read this book, but they would love to hear a Star Wars story, it is completely appropriate to read aloud to children, I believe.
Oh, maybe, you know what? Maybe I will read this one then, Mason. That's actually a good idea. It's actually, while Light of the Jedi is certainly not one to read to kids.
No.
This might be an excellent way to get them invested in this section of Star Wars.
And it could be their era.
Wow. You know what? You may be right. My last one is, and I've alluded to this throughout this show, but the way that this book builds on Light of the Jedi, how it mentions characters from that book, how when I look back, how Light of the Jedi mentions characters from A Test of Courage, and again through Into the Dark as well, but in particular with these two books, it really does they complement each other at such an incredibly high level. I mean, yes, we've got the Lucasfilm Story Group. Yes, we've got incredibly intelligent and capable and gifted editors at Del Rey and Lucasfilm. But the way these authors have collaborated, and people who have listened to the show have heard Charles Soule on the show. I hope to have other authors from this era of Star Wars storytelling on very, very soon too. But they really nailed it. The way that they're able to capture a very similar voice and a very similar tone and embrace the spirit of these characters is staggering. Like, I don't even know, based on the collaborative process, how much of Vernestra Rowe is from Justina Ireland or how much it is from stuff she heard someone talk about at Skywalker Ranch, or how much she was inspired by something that Charles Soule said, or Daniel Jose Older, or Kevin Scott, or Claudia Gray. I really don't know. And that's the great thing about it. The way that they complement one another, you really can't tell. It feels like the same character. It feels like these books have one voice in them, even though it's different authors telling the stories in different ways. And I think that's brilliant. Yeah. You're not squelching the creativity of the other authors, but they're legitimately working together to create this bonfire of Star Wars magnificence. And I'm happy to hear myself saying it because I'm really blown away. I love it. And honestly, like I said, this felt, at first, it all felt a little daunting. Like, I mean, I know Luke Skywalker, I know Kylo Ren, I know Rey, I know Anakin, I know Obi-Wan. I didn't know any of these characters, but after these two books, and particularly with the way A Test of Courage kind of ends things, I am just insanely riveted and thrilled about this book. So the way that they built this, the way that we've got more to tell.
I took all that you just said for granted because I noted how well they connected. But when, as you were talking, it made me think back to those, I don't know what you call them, the sizzle reels or whatever, but where we saw Project Luminous coming to life, where they were all sitting, as you mentioned, at Skywalker Ranch, and they had that long table where I think Matt Martin was at that table, and Pablo and like everybody who knows a story and the story. And they showed that clip where they have like all of the stuff up on the whiteboard. And then of course, everybody was analyzing every little bit and word written up there. And I'm like, no wonder why it's so well connected, because, as you said, Vernestra Rowe might be created from something someone else said, but Justina Ireland is the one that put pen to paper, or keyboard to screen, and inputted and wrote the story. But all of that came from sort of all of them as Project Luminous. And I just think that's magnificent. And I would love to know, and I need to go back and think about this and see, has there been another project like this in literature where it hasn't been necessarily the thinking of one person and their son or something like that, but has there been such an effort by a group of authors and story writers to put together an amazing story to be told individually by single authors, but where it's all developed by all authors?
I mean, in print, nothing comes to mind. Luke, I would say The Mandalorian comes pretty close.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, not in print, not that I can think of.
So it's sort of unprecedented storytelling or story creation, I guess.
Yeah.
But so it's wonderful the way as you said, the way these two books were brought together. And I'm with you. The way this book ends, I can't wait for the next set of these books. And what I look forward to is you're not sure exactly where these characters will pop up next. Like, will it be in another Charles Soule, or will it be in a Cavan Scott book somewhere, or be in another book by Justina? I mean, we don't know where they'll come back, which kind of is tantalizing as well.
Yep. It really, really is. Let's go ahead and take another quick break before we close out the show. This is Coffee with Kenobi.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
As we near the end of the show today, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a cup of coffee with me, and for helping to spread the word about our Star Wars family we've got here at Coffee with Kenobi. Be sure to tune in Monday nights at 8 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live or www.facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi and have a cup of coffee, tea, or any beverage of your choosing with me as we continue the conversation. To join us in the CWK Cafe, which is our Facebook group, and share your Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions in a family-friendly, spoiler-free place that is also drama-free, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/community and be part of the conversation, talk about this week's show, or just talk about some Star Wars. We have a lot of fun, and you'll make some new friends as well as catch up with longtime friends along the way. I also want to thank all of the new and longtime members of the CWK Alliance and let you know how much I appreciate your help and encouragement. I really appreciate our CWK Alliance members: Carol Cantwell, James Kersey, Greg Hargrove, Cato McNichol, Mary Purdue, Terry King, Smooth Rivera, J.C. Poe, Ed Kimoto, Robert Avila, Dustin Mills, Chelsea Sansbury, Tyler Pompa, Hannah, Alex Procasio, Ian Thompson, David Nicely, Simbot Deptridarian, Christine Turk, Ross Halliban, Kurt McQuellan, Dan Ream, Colby Mead, Brian Harding, Frank Mulder, Blake Weaver, Chris Metz, LJ Souter, Chris Skavarka, Jeff Ellis, Yancey Evans, Daz Davies, Susan Gray, Thea Selby, Christian Dale, Brian McKinney, Jim Capron, Connie Shee, Jared Cantor, Jason Hall, Eric Struthers, Greg McLaughlin, Aaron Harris, Mark Suter, Angela Sauce, and Dennis Keithley. If you want to join the CWK Alliance, go to www.cwkalliance.com and sign up today. Not only will you help out Coffee with Kenobi, but you also get access to CWK Pour-Over, the exclusive weekly podcast not heard anywhere else. It's a great way to support and help out the show, and 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to the St. Jude Children's Hospital to support the incredibly important work they are doing to help these brave children and their families. Plus, contributors at the CWK All-Star level can watch a video podcast of CWK Pour-Over hosted by me, Tom Gross, and Corey Clubb. Feel free to reach out anytime if you have any questions. in addition to being part of the community on Facebook. Please don't forget to visit our website at www.coffeewithkenobi.com for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. If you have a question for me or just want to share your thoughts on the air, feel free to email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com and I'll share them on the show. You can also connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zaire, MRZEHR, or on Instagram at DanZareCWK. There are also a lot more ways to connect with me and Coffee with Kenobi on social media. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook at facebook.com/Coffee with Kenobi. Check us out on Pinterest or subscribe to our Coffee with Kenobi YouTube channel. On our YouTube channel, you can find Facebook Live video, different interviews throughout the years, highlights of video coverage throughout the Coffee with Kenobi history, and the audio podcast itself. You can order my book, The Star Wars Book, which I co-wrote with Lucasfilm's Pablo Hidalgo and Cole Horton, on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Books A Million, Walmart, or anywhere books are sold. You can also find my writing on Coffee with Kenobi's website, as well as StarWars.com, where I am an official blogger there, and on IGN, where I contribute occasionally to articles about Star Wars, as well as other popular culture topics. If you are considering starting a podcast or a blog, let me know how I can help you get started and make your creative vision a reality. Be sure to check out danzmedia.com and we can get the process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization to talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. I want to inspire you to be inspired so you can take that first step into a larger world. Thanks as always to our Coffee with Kenobi sponsors, especially MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our travel partner and your one-stop shop for all things Walt Disney World, Disneyland, the Disney Cruise Lines, or anywhere on the planet you want to go on your vacation. Please go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel to book your magical vacation and help support Coffee with Kenobi in the process. If you like the show, please tweet out that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. And if the Force is especially with you, please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes or Google Podcasts. Every review makes a huge difference and helps to spread the word, and I can't thank you enough for your help, for your support, and your friendship. I love so much being a part of this wonderful Star Wars community, and I can't thank you enough for all that you do for me and Coffee with Kenobi. Wow, so much fun talking about A Test of Courage. I mean, this book was what cemented it for me also, that you know, when that Disney Plus series that takes place during this era of Star Wars storytelling comes out, I hope we get to see some of these characters in live action. And then I start thinking about, I really want to get figures of these characters and where am I going to put them? And, you know, apparently I am hook, line, and sinker. And I have a feeling that each of you listening to the show will be too. Please let us know your thoughts on A Test of Courage. We hope that we help to build the hype for you. And we look forward to seeing what you think as well. Speaking of what we all think, of course, you know where to listen to Mr. Gross each and every week on CWK Pro. We're hosted by myself, Tom, and Corey Club. But Tom also has, and I don't know if he knows I'm going to say this, but Tom has a little side blog that he's been working on that I think is really, really great that I'd love to have you share with everybody.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, geez. Thank you so much. I did not know you were going to bring that up.
I know you did.
So this is a little writing project that I've been working on, and in 2020, when we did on CWK Pour Over, I said one of my goals for 2020 was to start writing more, and so I've done that. And so I have a blog, and you can search it. It's called Seeking Positivity in the Galaxy, and it is not necessarily a Star Wars blog. I just kind of talk about things that I see that maybe we've passed up, that we can kind of stop. It's kind of a stop and smell the roses kind of blog, I guess, where I want everyone to look at this and say, hey, we have a lot of positivity around us in a world that maybe very publicly seems to focus on the negative, but there's so much positive in the world that we just sort of take for granted. And so I try to write about those things on my blog, and I'm always looking for ideas or suggestions or input on any of my writing. So you can do that either by just commenting on the blog posts themselves, or feel free to follow me on Twitter. It is @Draftline, DRAFTLINE, and let me know what you think. about that, or I'd love to hear your thoughts on A Test of Courage as well, because I hope that you enjoyed the book as much as I did. But even if you didn't, I'd love to hear, what is it that frustrated you? What was it that didn't connect with you? Because, hey, you know, we need to be able to share those things and talk about those things, and that's what literature and that's what storytelling is all about, is the sharing of those stories. So join up with me there, check out my blog, and thank you so much Dan for bringing that up.
You bet, man. Of course.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.
There's no one here. Move along.
Looking to catch up on the latest Star Wars books? Featuring sound effects and music directly from the movies, Star Wars audiobooks are the definitive listening experience. Listen to Star Wars Light of the Jedi, written by Charles Soule, read by Mark Thompson, and Star Wars The High Republic, A Test of Courage, written by Justina Ireland and read by Kaylor Lee. Available now wherever audiobooks are sold.